For the last 10 years, I have both played and covered the Atlantean Mermail strategy on this channel, and have enjoyed every step of the journey. I first picked up the deck in October of 2015, roughly a year after returning to the game. At the time, the deck had already been out of the limelight for a while and had suffered a few hits on the ban list. Deep Sea Diva and Gun were limited, while Atlantean Dragoons was semi-limited. Although the deck's circumstances may have seemed grim then, it wouldn't remain that way for long, as its greatest support card of all time would soon be released, Neptibus the Atlantean Prince. Fast forward to 2016, and the deck was just as powerful, if not more so, than ever before. Neptibus, Elder Entity Norden, and Totally Awesome elevated the deck to even greater heights. Two of these cards still see play even to this day. Unfortunately, this power trip didn't last long, as Mermail would soon be on the downswing once more after Norden was banned in April of 2016. While the deck was still great, it had certainly lost some steam. Moving on to 2017 and the dawn of Link format, the deck hit a wall. With little to no Link support and a lack of good boss monsters, the deck was quickly swept under the rug. Thankfully, this would only be a temporary setback, as Sekka's Light and several Link monsters, including the Troymare cards, or Nightmares as we know them today, alongside Saryusha Skulldread, Firewall Dragon, and many more would come to aid the strategy, allowing it to pull off one of the strongest end boards of the Link era, the U-Link. As most of us know, Firewall Dragon was finally banned in December of 2018, thus stripping the deck of another powerful asset. However, when one door closes, another one opens. The release of the Orcus cards in Savage Strike and Dark Neostorm allowed the deck to resurface once more, as it was adept at performing the Orcus combo while also being able to drop Moulin Glacia on the opponent, stripping them of 2 cards in their hand. This version of the deck was quite strong and extremely consistent, though it was probably one of my least favorite variants of the deck. Still, that too would come to an end with the banning of the ever-powerful Nightmare Mermaid in October of 2019. Oh, and the deck finally received its first ever Link monster in the form of Mermail Abyssalacia. Its release was unfortunately overshadowed by the Orcus takeover. I also owe an honorable mention to Marinsys Coral Anemone, as it was another powerful Link monster that Mermail gained access to in 2019. Moving on to 2020 and the advent of Master Rule 5, Mermail was evolving yet again. In March of that year, Crystron Halqifibrax, one of the greatest Link 2 monsters ever released, was introduced into the TCG. And of course, it was a water monster. Pair this with the release of the Deep Sea cards and Eternity Code a few months later, and the deck had a whole new arsenal of weapons, allowing it another chance to compete. Deep Sea Minstrel gave the deck a fighting chance to beat Nibiru, while Halq allowed the deck to perform powerful synchro summons on either player's turn. At this point, the deck's power level remained stationary. It was neither bad nor great, it was just simply okay, and it stayed that way for a while. In 2023, the deck saw one of its last dances with a meta engine. This time around, the Sprite archetype served the deck well, allowing for even easier access to Totally Awesome through cards like Gigantic Sprite and Sprite Elf. After this, the deck would slowly sink into the depths of mediocrity, awaiting its next chance to evolve. Left dormant for more than a year, the core booster set Rage of the Abyss, the successor to Abyss Rising, would release in the TCG, providing the archetype with brand new cards for both engines. The deck was finally coming into its own, no longer clinging on to meta-relevant staples and splashable engines. Though one final piece of the puzzle would release the following year in Supreme Darkness, Poseidra the Storming Atlantean. The release of this extremely powerful card would usher in a new era for the deck, allowing it to eventually win its first YCS title since 2014. After all of this time in history, we arrive at the present day. As you can see, I've been following and playing this deck on the channel for a very long time. And I gotta say, while I've been working on this video, I took a major nostalgia trip rewatching all of my old Mermail videos. All that time spent reminiscing made me eager to pick up the deck once again and I'm so glad I did. Over the past few months, I've had the pleasure of testing, building, and playing this deck at local tournaments, and it has been an absolute blast to pilot. No offense to Speedroid, but this deck is just so much better. Not only is the deck ceiling far higher when going first, but it just feels so much more versatile and consistent. Not to mention, it has access to some incredibly unfair cards like Deep Sea King Sewellicant and Water Barrier Statue of the Torrent. I've been looking forward to bringing you guys on this journey with me for quite some time now, so let's go ahead and begin. Before we go any further, I just want to go ahead and address the elephant in the room. The most recent FNL list has drastically altered how I planned this video to play out, but I'm not going to go ahead and let the banning of Bahamut Shark just kill this video outright. So allow me to go ahead and relive my experience with the deck while it was still at full power. Every time I pick up a new deck, I always begin testing with a blank slate. However, since it's been years since I last played Mermail, this was challenging. I had no idea where to begin, so I started looking for starter lists on YouTube. From there on, it was over to YGO Omega, where I spent a few days grinding the ladder with the deck, and I quickly climbed the ranks while making slight adjustments along the way. While I still had much to learn about the deck, I had most of the combos down and understood how all of the new cards worked. So, what did the bulk of my testing boil down to? Well, to keep it short, I could summarize it like this. The deck dominated going first. Many of my end boards consisted of Double Toad, Alacia, Mermail King, and Water Barrier Statue of the Torrent. This board alone beat so many decks, even after letting my opponent draw 10 plus cards off a Fualos. Though the real strength in this came in the form of one of my favorite interactions, which was having Abyss Ryan set up in the graveyard with Neptibus in hand to be able to reborn Poseidra and protect the statue in the battle phase. Nearly all of my opponents overlooked this as they burned their normal summon and headed straight for the battle phase. I should add here that I know many successful builds opted not to play the statue, and while I see the logic in it, I just couldn't convince myself to play the deck without it. It had won so many games for me almost single-handedly, which is why I chose to keep it in my final variant both before and after the ban list. Moving on, consistency was amazing. While of course the deck did brick here and there, I found myself opening Prince, or at least many ways to get to it. And believe me, most of the time, when Prince resolved, I won that game. Deep Sea King was another amazing card. This card alone facilitated some powerful boards, especially if my main combo line was interrupted. It was so much fun to freestyle with this card. I found myself setting up lots of rank 4 plays alongside Synchro 7 and 10 lines with the help of Grethus. One of the last positives I'll bring up is the fact that going second with this deck was actually fun. I recall so many times in the past playing Mermail solely for the fact that it excelled at going second, and with it being such a going first oriented era of Yu-Gi-Oh!, it was refreshing to see and experience a deck that really could go into boards with the engine alone. Poseidra, Abyss, and the Storming Atlantean felt so satisfying to resolve when going into any board. The removal was top notch, and I also love that Poseidra can double as a combo starter. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot, Deep Sea Minstrel was another insane card. I'm sure this isn't a surprise to anyone, as this card has been around for a while, but being able to search this early on in the combo just felt too good to be true sometimes. Now, on to some of the downsides. First and foremost, D-Shifter. This card was pretty much always an automatic loss for Mermail. With this in mind, I had no choice but to side deck Crossout Designator alongside a copy of D-Shifter for myself. Outside of this very obvious roadblock for Mermail, the only other issue I encountered was Abyss Dweller, and figuring out how to properly execute some of the deck's complex combos and decision trees. After all of these years of playing the deck across various formats, I can honestly say this has to have been the most fun and powerful version of the deck by far. With much needed testing and learning out of the way, it was time to sleeve up the deck and take it to locals. My first time playing the deck in paper was at this very tournament, and if I'm being totally honest, I wasn't feeling super confident in my abilities to pilot the deck that evening, though the results at the end of it were quite surprising. So here in round 1, I had the pleasure of playing against Tistina, which is a deck I have never played against before, and I also at the time didn't realize that this deck existed. I'm not sure if the archetype came out during my hiatus or not, but I had no idea what any of the cards did. My opponent led with the Tistina Demigod, and I pretty much ashed that on a whim if I'm being honest, and it must have been a pretty good ash because it did cause them to pass turn. I ended up drawing Teus for turn, pitching Dragoons, and that goes ahead and resolves. From there, I normal summon Neptibus and proceed to do full combo. And honestly, I don't even really get to do full combo. I kind of tunnel visioned on my going first end board, and I didn't realize I had game on board, but my opponent pointed it out and they admitted defeat. So end up taking the game there pretty easily. Let's move into game 2. In game 2, my opening hand is Perulia, Pike, Rhine, Ash, and Dragoons. I start by activating Perulia in the standby phase, prompting my opponent to use an Ash of their own. My opponent then proceeds to activate Sentinel, which I decided to Ash myself. Again, I'm new to the deck. I don't know if that was a good Ash or not. It was probably terrible because they continued to play from there on out, activating the Demigod. And later on, they go into a Fiendsmith combo, which I wasn't expecting, but I honestly shouldn't be surprised. It's basically the second coming of the Nightmare combo at this point. That allows them to get into the DDD rank 6. They search for Discordance of the Tistina, and eventually they establish Varudris, the final bringer of end times. And when I saw this card, it brought back a lot of memories, because I remember when this card first got announced, I was like, this would be an incredible card to play in like rank 10 terrain. So it was actually cool to see that card also out in the TCG and out on the board in front of me. I draw Ryan for a turn, and I quickly concede because I knew there was no way I was playing through that board there. This brings us to the all-important game 3, where my opening hand is Minstrel, Statue, Crossout Designator, Dragoons, and Ash. If I'm being honest, this hand was absolutely disgusting. Minstrel reveals the entire hand, showing me Ash, Engraver, Demigod, and 2 copies of Breath. With Ash out of the way, Dragoons grabs me a Neptibus, and a few moments later, I end on Mermail King, a double-toed Chenying with Sting and Prince added to hand. Admittedly, I did mess up by not establishing the barrier statue. I know that when you open a card like Statue alongside a few other cards, it does kind of change how you have to do that combo, and I did mess it up a little bit. I was still learning them, didn't have them completely down pat, but it did not matter. I ended up actually using my own Crossout Designator to trigger Chenying to basically clear the field and the graveyard, shutting them down of their only combo line, and we end up taking the match off of that alone. In round 2, I ended up playing against Malice. I know, right? Super fun. Ended up losing the die roll. And in game 1, my opening hand was Ryan, Ash, Statue, Dragoons, and Teus. My opponent opens Dormouse to banish the White Rabbit, which was then summoned to set TB 11. My opponent then climbs into Red Ransom, which I decide to Ash. And honestly, that was probably an awful play. I feel like I'm always guessing every time I use hand traps against Malice, because sometimes a hand trap here works and sometimes it doesn't. My opponent then hits me with Talons to put back Dragoons, and they combo into a bow with Nightmare Griffin, which I am unable to play past, so we head into game 2. In game 2, I open up Prince, called by the Grave, Dragoons, Rhine, and Teus. As expected, my opponent has D-Shifter, which immediately forces my called by. My opponent then chains a Perulia, which honestly wasn't a big deal. I find this deck plays very well under Perulia. I then normal summon Neptibus, and its effect fully resolves. Later on, Minstrel snipes a Nibiru, and at this point, I know I am completely safe to proceed with my combo, allowing me to end on Double Toad, Statue, and Mermail King. I could have ended on an Abyssalacia here if I managed my zone placement a bit better and remembered to use Greeth's effect after I revived it off Anemone. It's an effect I did forget quite a bit in the beginning, but that free revive sometimes is crucial, especially for extra rank 4 fodder and link fodder. But regardless, we take the dub and head into game 3. In Game 3, my opening hand was Imperm, Impulse, Perulia, Poseidra, and Neptibus. My hand was incredibly strong for going second, so the pressure to not squander it was definitely wearing on me, especially since my opponent didn't draw a D-shifter, surprisingly. My opponent leads with Gold Sarcophagus for Dormouse, which causes me to fire my Imperm. And thankfully, this is actually enough as my opponent uses Thrust for a D-barrier and ends their turn. As my combo progresses, my opponent has Ash for my Abyssrine, which slowed me down quite a bit. After putting a little bit of damage on, I pass turn on a board of just Mermail King, though I definitely should have made Alacia instead. In the end phase, my opponent uses Druid Worm to banish Dormouse. Next turn, I use Impulse on a White Rabbit, then throw the game by using Poseidra to bounce his Druid Worm. I honestly don't know what I was thinking here. I think it just boils down to I just jumped the gun, and it cost me the game as well as the match, unfortunately. Moving on to round 3, we get to play against another Malice deck. We ended up winning die roll here, and in game 1, my opening hand was double Teus, double Pike, and Ash. Not the greatest opening, I know, but I'll take it, especially since I ended up winning the die roll. This weak hand was able to get a combo going, which eventually allowed me to snipe an Impulse out of his hand with Minstrel, where I could then set up my board. To be fair, my opponent should have used their Impulse on the Shadow Squad, but even if they did, I had Ryan in hand to follow up for the big fish. Fast forward a ways, and I'm able to end on a board of Toad, Statue, and Mermail King. I also had Ryan in graveyard, set up to be able to pitch Prince in order to revive Poseidra. This is the interaction I talked about in testing, and here you can see just how clutch it is at sealing the game. As expected, I was forced to go second in game 2, and I was not lucky enough to draw Lancia, so naturally, I lost. Not much else to be said there. In game 3, my opening hand could not have been better, as I opened Crossout, Double Rhine, Prince, and Lancia. My opponent fired the D-shifter in the standby phase, where I quickly responded with the Crossout to save the day. From there on out, I began to combo until I was hit with a Droll, and my Rhine was impulsed. These hand traps forced me to link into Lacia and pass, hoping Lancia would be enough. Desperately in need of a good top deck, I found myself stunted as I drew another Lancia for my turn. I might have been unable to play, but neither was my opponent. Eventually, my opponent made the mistake of killing my Alacia, which, while it was impulsed, it was still able to send Dragoons to the graveyard as cost, allowing me to search Prince, thus sealing the deal on the next turn. It felt so good to finally take a match off this godforsaken deck. With only one round left in the tournament, I was hoping to round out the night with a win, and my complete lack of experience against the Centurion deck wasn't going to make that any easier. So needless to say, winning the die roll here gave me a big confidence boost, especially since my opening hand was so good. Teus, Minstrel, Poseidra, Prince, and Abyssrine were more than enough to go for an end board consisting of Double Toad, Mermail King, Barrier Statue, and Alacia. Hard drawing Minstrel just felt so unfair, especially since my opponent had only one hand trap. I kind of got into the thought process of wanting to play multiple Minstrel because this interaction of hard drawing Minstrel just felt so incredibly unfair sometimes, but that's probably just me being biased towards this feeling, and I could see a point where maybe drawing multiple Minstrel would be pretty bad, and I kept having to remind myself, we can search it, we can search it, we can search it. And if I am lucky enough to open it, going first in any given game, then so be it. But man, it is so unfair when that happens. Going to game 2, I opened up Ash, Imperm, Poseidra, Rhine, and Prince. My opponent was able to establish something of a board through my two poorly placed hand traps, but luckily for me, a top-decked Impulse was able to shut down the rest of his board as he tried to quick synchro on my turn. This Impulse allowed Neptibus to walk, and at this point, all I needed to do was find a way to break the board and OTK, and having access to Poseidra Abyss in the extra deck made that so incredibly easy. Seriously, I love resolving this card, and the fact that I can just slap it on top of Abyss Trite sometimes just felt like cheating. I get to go into a rank 7 that practically revives anything in my graveyard, then I can turn it into a triple compulse at 3,500. I mean, really, such an amazing card. So to ensure the segment doesn't drag on too long, I'm going to quickly recap this entire local as it was a major disaster. But I'd also like to point out that this was an entirely new local that I had never attended before, and I quite enjoyed the storefront as well as the atmosphere. It was just unfortunate that my tournament experience went so poorly. So in round 1, I played against my buddy Dan on Malice. And honestly, this was probably one of the best matches of the night, despite me still losing 1-2. I felt like we had a pretty grindy match, but just could not seal it against the Malice deck, especially since I ended up losing die roll. Round 2 was against Malice again. This was one of the quickest matches of my entire life. I lost die roll, and my opponent had D-Shifter in the standby phases of both Game 1 and Game 2. Some of the most unfun moments of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've had in my entire life. Moving into round 3, we get some variety where I played against the Blue Eyes deck, and I won the die roll, and I got to 2-0 rather easy there. Not too big of an issue. The Blue Eyes matchup has been a little difficult in the past, but this one was really just a breeze. Nothing else to be said there. And in round 4, we played against Malice again. Third time's a charm. Nope. We ended up losing this one as well. 2-0, and I won die roll, but that really didn't matter because I bricked so hard in Game 1, and in Game 2, I opened up a weak hand that got hand trapped to death. This was also like one of the first documentations of me actually bricking with the deck, like drawing a near unplayable hand. I'm just glad I got it out of the way at this locals, which was already gone down the drain. It is what it is, and let's just move on to the next locals. So 2 weeks actually ended up passing between this locals and the last, and I quite enjoyed the time off. In the meantime, I adjusted the list a bit more and got in some more testing online. Though my deck list for this tournament was less than ideal, as I had to return a few staples that I had been borrowing from a few friends. And this basically meant that I was only able to play 2 copies of Impulse instead of 3, and I no longer had access to Mulcharmy Perulia. So I had to substitute for some less than ideal hand traps like Nibiru and Ghost Bell. Now, it's obviously not the end of the world, but I just wanted to point this out, is that you may see some weird hand traps in the deck, and yeah, might be wondering why, but that's basically why. Alright, so hopping into round 1, we played against Malice. I know, right? It honestly just feels like this purgatory where I cannot escape playing anything other than Malice, and I am just not looking forward to this upcoming format where there is even more Malice, as it is still the undisputed best deck. But I digress. Let's just go ahead and get through this one. Ended up losing die roll, and in Game 1, my opening hand was Pike, Pot of Prosperity, Minstrel, Poseidra, and Abyss Rhine, though none of this really mattered, as my opponent dropped D-Shifter, and I scooped immediately as I was not wasting any time on this lost cause. Moving into Game 2, my opening hand was Dragoons, Prince, Crossout, Lancia, and Abyss Rhine. As you might expect, I was going first here, and my opponent started things off with D-Shifter, but thankfully this time I had an answer in of Crossout. Moments later, though, he chained a Fua to Neptibus. At this point, I had 2 options. Either stop the combo early and hope Lancia is enough to stop him on the next turn, or to play through the Fua and set up an unbreakable board. Now, I decide for the latter, but I probably should have just passed, if I'm being totally honest, but, you know, it is what it is. Further on in the combo, my opponent finally starts to use some of his hand traps like Bell and Impulse, but it's not enough, as I'm still able to end on Mermail King, Toad, and Statue, which is just more than enough, especially Poseidra loaded up in the graveyard with Rhine and Prince in hand and all that stuff. And, you know, as expected, he did normal summon, go right into the battle phase. I bounced it back with Poseidra, and that was just wraps. Now in the third and final game, my opening hand was double Lancia, Imperm, Prince, and Poseidra. I led with Lancia in the standby phase, which my opponent chained a cross out to, and then proceeded to chain my other Lancia, hoping that I'd be able to shut the turn down right here and now, but he proceeded to chain a D-Shifter in response, which is the last thing I was hoping to see. He then proceeds to set 1 card and pass. Right? It may seem like a good thing, like, yeah, of course I forced my opponent to pass turn with Lancia, but he's basically essentially forcing me to skip my turn because D-Shifter lasts for 2 turns for some reason. But either way, my draw for turn was Deep Sea King, which was honestly an abysmal draw, but that active D shifter was obviously a much bigger problem, so I was forced to just pass turn, hoping Imperm could do the trick next turn. My opponent normals Dormouse, which I proceed to Imperm immediately, and luckily he just proceeds into the battle phase, attacks, and ends his turn. On my turn, I draw Dragoons, which was the perfect discard fodder for my Poseidra, which let me start playing into his very weak board. Though here is where I made my first mistake by returning the Dormouse to hand. In doing so, I've essentially guaranteed him follow-up if I can't establish a good board. I probably should have just bounced one of the set cards. I honestly don't know what I was thinking. And to make matters worse, I made another massive mistake by not searching Minstrel with Dragoons. In doing this, I played directly into Nibiru, and with no board left after the fact, the Dormouse I had returned to his hand came back to haunt me, and I lost the match. I honestly think I just probably got a bit too greedy here and just failed to pay attention to those small details. Like, yeah, don't bounce back his best starter into his hand, because that really means you need to win right now and not lose to another hand trap, because essentially, you know, you just put yourself into a corner, which is what I did. But lesson learned. Yeah, it is what it is. Let's move on to the next match. So round 2, we'll keep things quick here. I ended up playing against a Resonator deck, and despite losing die roll, I was able to win the match 2-0. It was a pretty one-sided match, if I'm being honest, and I think my opponent might have been somewhat new to the game, so we can just go ahead and skip past this one. Although I will say it was nice to play against something that wasn't Malice. I can definitely go ahead and appreciate that. Now here in round 3 is where things get interesting. I actually ended up playing against Marincess here, and I did lose die roll. My opening hand was Double Squad, Impulse, Poseidra, and Imperm. Now the opponent playing Marincess here was actually an opponent that I think I've played 2 times prior when I was on Speedroid, and they themselves were actually playing Mermail, so it's kind of cool to see the roles reverse here. And it was also really cool to see Marincess again, since it had been such a long time since I had played the deck, and much like in the last round there. Thankfully for me, though, I still remembered how to interact with this deck, so I knew that using Imperm on a Sea Angel would definitely put a damper on things, and it did, as he just passed turn. And after drawing Abyssrine for my turn, I led with Poseidra pitching Squad to start things off. This line eventually had me resolving Minstrel after playing through a set wave, and the Minstrel revealed a handful of hand traps, which honestly is no surprise. I see Impulse, Nib, and Fua. Though hitting Nib was the obvious choice here, Ryan was able to successfully force the Impulse, which allowed me to continue to combo without the fear of further interruption. At this point, I was in the driver's seat and just proceeded to win outright. In game 2, my opening hand was Poseidra, Ash, Dragoons, Deep Sea King, and Pike. This time around, my opponent was able to play through the one hand trap as he opened up Seahorse, so the Ash on the Sea Angel wasn't nearly as impactful, as he was able to combo into Triangle and search out a copy of Wave. I was expecting him to go into a Link 4, but he did not have enough gas to do so because he did not get access to Dive. And yeah, with my understanding of the deck, I knew this was a pretty weak end board, and I'd be able to break it next turn, assuming that he didn't have an entire hand filled with hand traps. I draw Imperm for turn, not the greatest draw, but I guess it could have been worse. I lead with Poseidra pitching Dragoons and sending Squad, targeting a set card, which forced out Wave. On the resolution of Dragoons, my opponent had a Droll and Lockbird, which is a bit frustrating, but that extra copy of Pike in my hand allowed me to establish a Bahamut, which forced yet another Wave. From here, I had to link into Alacia and just pass turn. I didn't want to run over his Triangle here, as that would allow him to reborn both Anemone and Blue Slug on his next turn. My opponent understands that he needed to get his Triangle into the graveyard, so he goes straight into the battle phase to attempt a crash, which forces me to use Alacia, pitching Prince to search for a Mermail, which triggers Prince to bring out Poseidra to attempt to bounce the Triangle, but his Imperm just goes ahead and shuts that down entirely. My opponent then is able to crash and revive and combo into Bubble Reef while adding back Wave along the way and reviving Triangle with his Bubble Reef. In the standby phase, I decided Ash's Bubble Reef before leading with another Poseidra, which then forced another wave. Prince then hits the board and fully resolves, which puts me in a good spot. The 3200 Bubble Reef was my biggest roadblock at this point, but I knew I'd have no problem getting over that with the help of Abysstrite and that nice little attack boost that it offers. But unexpectedly, my opponent actually uses Ghost Ogre on Abysstrite while I try to reborn the Deep Sea King, which lost me that attack boost, as well as access to Poseidra Abyss. Now, my only hope of getting over Bubble Reef was with the help of either Alacia or Cheng Ying. Deep Sea King resolves here to bring out Pike and Grease, which allows me to synchro into Cheng Ying, and the remaining level 4s were used to make Dweller for an even bigger boost. While it wasn't the greatest end board, it was more than enough, as next turn Dweller shut down Triangle, and Ryan was able to draw me a card and trigger Cheng Ying in the process to banish the new Trickstar off the board to secure the match. Now, as we head into the fourth and final round, I actually ended up playing a mirror match against my good friend Kaz. Ended up losing the die roll here, and in game one, my opponent unfortunately bricked, and they bricked pretty badly. And I opened a pretty decent hand consisting of double Dragoons, Ash, Teus, and Grethus, with Nibiru as the 6th card. The only hand trap my opponent had for me was a Fua, which I obviously ashed, and after that he immediately scooped, and we head into game two. In game two, my opening hand was Impulse, Nibiru, Teus Dragoons, and Poseidra. My opponent leads with Poseidra pitching Dragoons to add a copy of Prince, which he immediately normal summons to send Shadow Squad, and to add a copy of Dragoons. I decided to use my Impulse on a Shadow Squad, which turns off my Nibiru, I know, but I figured if I let that Shadow Squad resolve, he gets access to Pike, and then he can search Minstrel, which means my Nibiru isn't going to resolve regardless. Though what happened next I wasn't expecting, is my opponent had apparently made a rather big misplay by adding that Dragoons to his hand, as he had no other means of playing. Either he just forgot to add Rhine, or was maybe expecting that his squad was going to resolve so he could summon Pike, then Pike pitch the Dragoons and keep playing. But either way, unfortunately made a big mistake there. I did offer him a chance to take it back, but he decided to own up to it and proceeded to set 2 and pass turn. For my 6th card, I ended up drawing another copy of Impulse. Not great, not terrible. But with my opponent only having an Alacia and a few back row, I felt confident in my ability to win the game this turn. Poseidra was practically glued to my hand the whole night, and I couldn't have been happier about it. It applies so much pressure when going second, and I'm glad I was playing it at 3 copies in my list that night. Poseidra ended up forcing an Impulse, and my Dragoons ended up getting smoked by Call by the Grave, and at this point my potential plays were now severely limited, but my opponent was also in a bad spot since he plays Dragoons as well, so that meant next turn he wouldn't be able to resolve Dragoons either. So with this in mind, I decided to take a really risky play, which had me resolving Teus, pitching Poseidra to add Rhine, and then I just immediately shotgun Rhine's effect for Deep Sea King, and surprisingly it ended up resolving, drastically shifting the odds of winning the match in my favor. And upon attempting Deep Sea King's effect, my opponent did concede. So unfortunately my opponent did not open up well in game 1 there, and kind of lost to a misplay there in game 2. It happens to the best of us, but we ended up taking the dub and finished the night 3-1. Now, to go ahead and recap, this last month playing Mermail went far better than I expected it would. I also ended up pulling a few great cards from my prize and entry packs. I recall pulling a QCR Fusion, as well as that lovely Ultimate Rare Sage with Eyes of Blue. Outside of the occasional instant loss to D-Shifter, I felt that the deck performed amazingly, and at times just felt unstoppable going first or second. While my list might have been far from ideal, that didn't stop the deck from netting me 7 wins and only 5 losses. This equates to a 58% win rate. I'm going to miss this version of the deck, and putting my Bahamut Sharks back in the binder was a lot more depressing than I thought it'd be, but alas, here we are in a completely new format. Alright everybody, welcome to the deck profiles segment. Finally, we are here. We've had a lot of roadblocks to get through, at least me personally, a lot of roadblocks to get through to actually filming this segment of the video. obviously we had that ban list, which kind of changed things drastically, and a whole bunch of other things going on in my personal life. But we are back and ready to finish up this video. So let's go ahead and hop into my new deck profile for this new format, obviously featuring the new ban list, as I won't be showing you guys the list that I played in the previous parts of the video because it's obviously no longer valid. Rest in peace, Bahamut Shark. You will be greatly missed. Although I do have to say, up front, I do quite like the build of this deck. I like how it takes more of a synchro-oriented approach and utilizes some new cards and some effects of some older cards that we didn't really get to utilize so much in previous builds. So I do like this change of pace quite a bit. But with all that out of the way, let's hop into the card by card. So without further ado, let's take a look at the main deck. I will be showing you guys a extra and side deck, of course, but let's hop right into the meat and potatoes of it, if you will. First and foremost, we have 3 copies of Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince. Nothing really to be said here. Card is a staple of the deck, heart and soul of the deck, and it's definitely not going anywhere anytime soon. Then we have 3 copies of Atlantean Dragoons. We're going to be starting with the Atlantean engine. 3 copies of Dragoons. This is also still a no-brainer in the deck. Yeah, one of your main searchers. And moving on, we have 3 copies of Poseidra, the Storming Atlantean. This card, I'm excited to see people playing this card at 3. As you guys know, in the previous builds of this deck, I was actually playing 3 in the main deck. Not because I thought it was particularly correct at the time, but just because I needed an extra card or 2 in the deck to fill up some space for some hand traps and staples that I was missing at the time. But it's really refreshing to see people actually playing 3 of this card now as sort of a correct call. And I think I've already expressed my opinions on this card earlier in the video. Absolute powerhouse, starter, extender, great going second card all around. Then we still have 3 copies of Abyssrine, the Atlantean Spirit. Grabs you your Deep Sea King Sewelacanth, lets you draw a card on the opponent's turn, which sets up your Prince to revive the Storming Atlantean. Still a very, very solid card all around. We still have that 1 copy of Atlantean Heavy Infantry, just as a nice piece to search to sort of complement the end board. Really good discard target now, especially not only for Alacia, not only for Abyssrine, but now for the Ravenous Crocosaur that we're running in the extra deck. Then moving into the Mermail engine, we have 3 copies of Mermail Shadow Squad. This was at 3 in the previous build, still at 3 in this build. Nothing to be said there. Still 3 copies of Visteus. Still a great starter. Opening this with Mermail Shadow Squad is one of your strongest openings. And then this is a change that I think a lot of people have made, including myself, going down to just 2 copies of Abyss Pike. I think this makes sense. We don't really have a huge reliance on level 4s anymore, specifically for rank 4s. I thought initially going into this new format, the extra deck would feature a lot of cards like Stealth Kraken and kind of going down that route where we'd want to make more rank 4 plays, but now there's just less viable. We're making rank 7s and rank 3s and actually doing a lot of synchro plays, so we don't really need too many level 4 bodies on field. We mainly just want these to summon off of the Sewelacanth when the combo calls for it, and it's still a pretty good starter. Even if you open it with just any random water monster, you can get to Abyssrine, obviously, to just get your Deep Sea King on field, or you can pitch something like Dragoons or Mermail Squad with it, and it's still very solid. Now, this card here is a card, as you guys know, that I wasn't playing in any of my previous builds. I just felt it unnecessary because of the way the deck was playing, and there was never really any time that I wanted to search for Mulan in my combo. I always thought the Minstrel would just be more than enough, especially with the pressure that Toad applies, forcing your opponent to hand trap at certain points in the combo. Well, obviously we don't have that luxury anymore, so Mulan Glacier I think is a perfect fit now into the main deck. This card is insane. It's always been insane, at least in terms of Mermail's history, and I'm just glad to have it back in the deck, especially now that I've actually had time to learn combos to summon this card to put it on the field. Really glad to have Mulan Glacier back in the deck. Obviously, 1 Super Ancient Deep Sea King Sewelacanth. This card is an absolute powerhouse. I mean, there are some combos you can do with this deck that you just basically resolve Abyssrine any way you can, whether it be just Pike pitching a Perulia, or any random water monster for that matter, or Teus pitching Perulia or any random water monster, just grabbing Abyssrine and then going straight for the Deep Sea King. Now, obviously, those are fragile plays, but if they resolve, you know, you're in a really, really good spot, and you can freestyle all these awesome combos and end on a pretty killer board off of just Coelacanth alone. One water barrier statue. As much as I hate taking dubs with this card, it just is what it is. It's too strong to not play, and like I said, just wins games on its own. One Deep Sea Minstrel. This card is also insane. A lot of people would argue these two cards right here are the most unfair things about Mermail, and I would agree with them 100%, but obviously you got to play them while we got them, so definitely going to keep them in the main deck. One, Greeth's Reptile Fin. I have a copy in French. I've had a copy in French ever since I first got my hands on this card, so I don't know the card's name fully, but I believe it's Greethus or something like that. This card, it was really good extender sort of combo piece to have in the previous build, and still very good obviously in this build. That Monster Reborn effect it has is just incredible and comes up a lot, especially now in this combo where we're summoning this card back multiple times, whether it be off of your Coelacanth, your Poseidra Abyss, or more importantly, your Anemone, and that can bring back the Neptibus. It can bring back a Pike for Synchro 7 plays, or with the Neptibus, you can Synchro off the Neptibus and the Prima Donna into Dragite. Just opens up so many possibilities, and I absolutely love this card. I wish it had come in a higher rarity. Maybe it does. I don't know. Next up, we have a copy of Butterfly Fish. Very, very new addition to the deck. I don't take any credit for this card. I think there was maybe a list or two that topped a YCS, or maybe a regional. I think top 4 at a regional. It was between this card and Friller Rabka was the other card, and I think that was the YCS build that was playing the Friller Rabka. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am. It's basically a level 3 fish you can summon off Coelacanth, and it has a graveyard effect where if, I think, one of your opponent's monsters targets a water monster you control for an attack, basically banish from your graveyard and negate the attack. Yeah, that's really good for protecting water barrier statue. Turns out, though, at least some of the theory and testing that I've done with this list, you don't really need that, especially when you take into account the extra utility Butterfly Fish has. We already have so many ways to protect the barrier statue. I think the Friller Rabka is just overkill at the end of the day. I mean, you have Crocosaur, you have Poseidra, you have Infantry, 3 ways to protect it, targeting with Mermail King. I think it's just overkill, like I said, and sometimes you have Changing also. Butterfly Fish has that ability where if it's discarded to activate a water monster effect, you can just add it back to your hand, so free card advantage is never a bad thing, but its graveyard effect is actually what ends up coming up a lot more, which says basically, while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can discard 1 card at the graveyard as cost, special summon this card, and then you can only use 1 Butterfly Fish effect per turn, and only once that turn. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except water monsters the turn you activate either of this card's effects. So a lot of times what you'll do is like you'll synchro off something into like you basically go like Prima Donna and Prince into Dragite, and then this will be in graveyard already, and then you'll Butterfly Fish, pitch something, bring this back out, and then use it as link fodder to step up into your Mermail King. And a lot of times if you don't have this set up in grave, you don't have a way to climb into Mermail King, and then you lose a big part of your end board. It's not the end of the world, but that targeting protection is key, because you don't want to just lose outright because your barrier statue just gets hit with an imperm, right? So I really like Butterfly Fish. I was going to play the Friller Rabka, like I said, because I have a super rare copy. Not that that's a great reason to play it, but I didn't have this card, and I had Friller Rabka, and then I kind of looked into it a bit more, and I was like, you know what, this is probably a better, more sound choice at the end of the day. So that's it for all the water monsters in the deck. I think this is over 40 cards. I think it might be like 42 or 43 cards. Only playing 2 spells in the deck. I think this is pretty standard for a lot of lists. 1-for-1 Pot of Prosperity. I was admittedly thinking about cutting Pot of Prosperity for a card in the side deck, either Called By or Triple Tactics Talent, now that it's at 1. I just think Prosperity conflicts with 1 too many cards in the extra deck. One being the Ravenous Crocosaur, another being Haggard Lizardos. I think there's sometimes where you have the Prosperity, and then those cards are kind of dead in your extra deck. I mean, granted, they become easy discard or banish targets for your Prosperity, but like losing out on those draws, especially with how discard heavy some of your combos can be, it does feel a little rough, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So if you don't like playing Prosperity, maybe you don't have Prosperity, whatever the case, you can always cut this for a Called By or a Triple Tactics Talent. And then into the hand traps and non-engine, we have 3 Molcharmi Foolos. Finally got my hands on this card. Yeah, really not much to be said. Really just great hand trap all around. Practically max C. And speaking of practically max C, we have 3 copies of Perulia. Not only is this card just great all around, and you know, same sense that Foolos is great, but it's a water monster. So the fact that we can discard this off of pretty much any Mermail or Atlantean, right? If you want to send this off of something like Poseidra, Stormy Atlantean, we can. Teus, Pike, you name it. It's really just great to have that extra synergy on top. It's not just a hand trap. It can be discard fodder. Then we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Imperm, right? And only 2 copies of Impulse. The reason I'm only playing 2 copies of Impulse is because I only have 2 copies. And the last time I checked, this card was like $100 a piece. So I figured, you know what? 2 is better than none. Obviously 3 would be ideal, but I'll just play 2 for now. So yeah, I'm fine with that. Obviously if you have 3, you can play 3 and just bump the card count up by 1. But yeah, I know some people are probably having some questions of why I'm not playing 3, and maybe they're not listening with audio, but again, I'm only playing 2 because I have to. If I had 3, I'd probably play the 3rd. Now into the extra deck, we have our XCs. 1, the Virtue Dragon. Originally when I was picking up Mermail, I picked this card up alongside the Virtue Stream. And, you know, I was seeing all these lists playing the Virtue Dragon. I assumed they might be playing the trap card, but I was wrong. And then I actually read the Virtue Dragon and found out it has an effect where you can detach a material from a monster you control, then add 1 Fish, Sea Serpent, or Aqua monster from your graveyard to your hand except itself. That is actually really clutch at recursion, especially for one of the combos, or for a couple of the combos, where you're making this, detaching, adding back Dragoons, and then linking off Poseidra Abyss into like a Haggard Lizardos or an Anemone, and then you use the effect of Poseidra Abyss Engraved to revive 3, and you pitch that Dragoons that you're adding back off the Virtue Dragon. So that recycling effect is very clutch, although that's really all this card is good for if you don't play the Virtue Stream. Then we still have 1 Abyss Trait, the Atlantean Spirit. I think this card is fine at 1. I've never really wanted a second one. Yeah, so I think 2 is fine. 1 Mermail Abyss Gaios, still I think a staple. Then we have 2 copies of Poseidra Abyss. I don't really think this was commonplace before Bahamut Shark got banned, because again, we now have like, I think it's like 5 free extra deck slots or something now that, you know, Shark is gone. We obviously lose the 2 Sharks, the 2 Toads, and I think maybe 1 other card. But yeah, we have extra room, and a lot of the combos, I think most of the combos actually take advantage of Poseidra Abyss's graveyard effect, where if it's linked, or if it hits the graveyard, you basically discard a card and then revive 3. Level 3, I think it's Fish, Sea Serpent, and or Aqua monsters from your hand or graveyard. But you have to summon 3, right? So if you don't have 3 in your graveyard, you can. If you don't have room for 3, you cannot use the effect. But yeah, you want to have 2, obviously, so you can use the first one for your combo, and then you don't want to be caught without having that second one in your extra deck, because that bounce 3 is just too strong going into board, as you guys saw on previous parts of this video. So really excited to finally be able to play 2 of these now, especially now that we have the room. And then for Synchros, Prima Donna, obviously summoning out your barrier statue. White Aura Monaceros, just basically reborns a fish, so gives you extra bodies to work with. The fact that it's a level 7 is great, because you can overlay this a lot of times with your Moulin if you use your Shadow Squad to make it a level 7, or your Deep Sea King Soulacant to go into Abyss Trite and revive another card. It also has a cool effect I think all the White Aura cards have, where if it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, then you can banish a water and summon it back, and it's treated as a tuner. Kind of a neat effect. I don't think I've ever resolved it. Even back when I played White Aura Porpoise in the previous build, I never resolved it. Shout out White Aura Whale, because I remember playing that card way back in the day at Mermail. Speaking of level 8 Synchros, we have the Adamancipated Risen Dragite. Feels so good to play this card again. A lot of times, I think 90% of the time, you're climbing into it with Deep Sea Prima Donna and Prince, going into Dragite. Then you can actually use Prima Donna's other effect to recycle a banish card you control. A lot of times you're putting back your Haggard Lizardos, which is nice just to recycle that card. And then we have a nice throwback here in the Ravenous Crocodragon Archethus. It's been a long time since I played this card. I don't know why I called it Crocosaur. But yeah, I always just remember the first part of it being Ravenous. This card is really cool. Basically, it takes 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuners, and you get to draw cards equal to the number of non-tuners used for its summon. So a lot of times, you're going to be going into this with 2 non-tuners, which means you're going to be drawing 2 cards, which is great for a couple reasons. You'll need to replenish your hand advantage, because again, a lot of these combos end up being very discard heavy. You're discarding for Poseidra Abyss. You're discarding for, you know, things like Teus and Pike. You're discarding things discarding for things like Suelacanth, right? So being able to recoup some of that card advantage is crucial. And then its other effect, where basically you can discard 2 cards in the opponent's turn, quick effect, target a card on the field and destroy it. That comes up really a lot, honestly, to protect your barrier statue. And I know you're thinking, discard 2 to pop 1, that's kind of like a really bad trade-off, isn't it? And yes, you'd be correct in thinking that, but 99% of the time you're going to be discarding your infantry that you search mid-combo, so you actually get to pop 2 cards. So it's like discarding 2 to pop 2, you kind of break even on that exchange. But yeah, great card all around. And it also gains 500 attack and defense for each card you have in your hand. So it might have 1,000, but sometimes it's going to be like 25. Then we have Trish and the Cheng Ying. Trish is just a nice addition since level 9 synchros come up quite a bit, especially with the Poseidon Abyss effect and resolving the Deep Sea King. The level 9 synchro plays come up quite a bit. Obviously, that's why we're also playing the Ravenous Kraken Dragon. And Cheng Ying is still Cheng Ying. This card is crazy. The synergy that it has, not only, of course, it being water, but being able to trigger this card with Abyss Rhine on the opponent's turn at any given point is just too good to pass up. One hell of a card, and as they say, Cheng Ying is most definitely still hitting. Then we have 1 Haggard Lizardos, 1 Anemone, 1 Mermail Abyssal Lacy, although I think I never summoned this card, and then 1 Mermail King Neptibus for that targeting protection, which is just too clutch to give up. But yeah, that is it for the extra deck. Pretty standard. The deck is still pretty much the same as it was before the ban list for the most part. I mean, as far as like the main and extra deck go, everything is the same. The only thing that has really changed is the combos. Then going into the side deck, take my side deck with a grain of salt, really. 3 Nibiru, 3 Lancia, 3 Droll and Lockbird, 2 Bell, 1 copy of Deep Sea Minstrel, just, another card for going first. And then speaking of going first cards, we have a Crossout, we have a Talents, and we have a Called by the Grave. I know some people kind of like the idea of siding DD Crow. You could play DD Crow instead of the ghost spells that I'm running. But yeah, like I said, take the side deck with a grain of salt. Use it as a template, I guess. And yeah, that is it for the main deck, extra deck, and side deck for my new Mermail deck list going into, June of 2025. So yeah, with all that out of the way, I think now we're going to move into a quick combo or two just to get you guys acclimated, like I had to get myself acclimated with how this deck works post that last ban list we had. So yeah, let's hop into that. Like I said, before we wrap things up here officially, I wanted to take a moment to show you guys a few combos just so you can see how the deck operates now post Alliance Insight. And before we go any further, I do owe a big shout out to Super Insane 18 on YouTube. He posted a combo tutorial a few weeks back on his channel. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. It's a very good video, very helpful video. It definitely helped me out a lot trying to figure out how the deck kind of operates, what the go-to combos are, so to speak, going into this new format. So definitely check out his video. It's very, very helpful, and if it helped me, it'll help you guys. So again, I'll leave a link that in the description, and make sure to toss him a sub if you have not done so already. But yeah, let's hop into this first combo here. This is basically just Neptibus plus Dragoons, super standard. Nothing super overly fancy here. Basic bread and butter combo. The 3 Perulias are in the hand, basically just as random discard fodder. As I mentioned before during the deck profile, a lot of the combos can be very discard heavy, so it's important to have extra random discards in hand. They don't need to be water monsters. They could literally just be anything. They could be impulses, imperms, ashes, what have you. It really does not matter for the end of the day. Now, of course, if they're like Atlantean or Mermail monsters, it could make things a little bit better for you. Maybe you're triggering another Dragoons, or maybe you're discarding an infantry going second, so on and so forth. Obviously, it gets better if they're actual real cards instead of just blanks. But we're going to go ahead and start this combo off by summoning Neptibus and sending Squad to add a Rhine. Not sending Dragoons, adding Dragoons Megalo, which I'm so used to doing in years past. But yeah, this is always just going to end up being better. We're going to go ahead and use Squad to summon out Abyss Pike effect to discard Dragoons. And we're going to add Minstrel here, obviously one of the most broken cards in the deck, and we're going to add Moulin Glacia off of that Dragoons. Now, if you don't play Moulin, or maybe you didn't open up Dragoons alongside the Neptibus, It's not the end of the world so long as you can still get that Minstrel in hand. Maybe you discarded like a Poseidra, which is okay because setting that card up in grave can actually be very, very good, as you'll see later on. Yeah, it doesn't really change things a whole lot. Again, if you don't have the Dragoons, something I wondered myself while learning this combo is like, well, what if I don't open up Dragoons? Does this combo kind of fall apart? Not exactly, not really. You're just going to lose out on that Moulin Glacia, which is not a big deal, especially since Minstrel can pick directly which card we want to get rid of. And it doesn't even matter, like, say these are all 3 imperms, right, and we didn't have a Moulin in hand, we still get a guaranteed water monster that we're going to end up discarding off of Minstrel, and you'll see that here in a second, because we're going to use Abyss Rhine in a way that I've historically never used the effect, which is basically to add the level 7 fish, sea serpent, or aqua to hand instead of just special summoning it. This effect right here. Yeah, I've always summoned, never added, but adding here just ends up making a lot more sense because you're actually giving yourself discard fodder for your Minstrel, and of course Prince effect is going to activate to bring back the Shadow Squad. Then we're going to go Minstrel effect, discarding itself and the Suelacanth, taking a look at the opponent's hand, ripping any card we need out of it to ensure that our combo can continue. And then again, here if you have Moulin Glacia, you can go ahead and freely summon it, obviously, for that bonus discard too. But like I said, if you didn't open up Dragoons and you missed out on that Moulin Search, not really the end of the world. Now we're going to go ahead and use the Shadow Squad effect here to discard a card and make everything level 7. Now, of course, if you didn't have Moulin, you're going to have to overlay with the Pike, which changes things a little bit down the road. But again, you can still kind of freestyle combo your way into your board. Not super difficult, but we're going to go ahead and overlay now with Moulin and Shadow Squad. Overlaying the Moulin is clutch because Moulin does have that effect where if it leaves the field, you lose your next battle phase, but once it becomes Xyz's material, you do not have to worry about that clause. Just complicated Yu-Gi-Oh game mechanics at its finest, so definitely want to overlay with the Moulin there so you don't have to worry about that penalty. And then you're going to go ahead and use the effect of Atlantean Spirit to bring back Suelacanth effect again, discarding to summon as many fish from the deck as possible. This is what I was talking about. Very discard heavy. We've already discarded several times. And then we're going to bring out the Gluttonous Reptolfin Greethus, Butterfly Fish, and that other copy of Pike. Remember, this attack position Pike is level 7. Then we're going to go ahead and overlay the 2 level 7s into Mermail, Abyss Gaios. So yeah, I think this right here would be one of the things that you'd miss out on if you did not have that Dragoons as that extra Gaios, because you wouldn't have this level 7 Pike on field. But Gaios, as much as I love Gaios, he isn't the craziest end board piece to have, but you know, it's still pretty helpful to have at some points. Then we're going to go into the Virtue Dragon. This is what I talked about in that profile. Add back that extra fodder so we can go ahead and use the Poseidra Abyss effect, which we're going to go ahead and use right now. We're going to link those both off into Anemone. We're going to trigger the effect of Poseidra Abyss, discarding the Dragoons we added back to summon back Butterfly Fish, Reptolfin, and the Atlantean Spirit. You could summon back the Shadow Squad here. I don't really think it makes a big difference. You just want to summon back those 3 level 3s. And then we're going to go into Crocosaur effect to draw 2. We drew Prince and Shadow Squad here. Really doesn't matter what we draw, it's just kind of bonus at this point. Reptolfin is going to get brought back off of the Anemone. And Reptolfin, keep in mind, because Reptolfin's effect actually says we can only summon, I think, up to the number of cards in the opponent's hand. Yeah, 1 fish, sea serpent, aqua, monster graveyard with an equal or lower level than the number of cards in your opponent's hand. So keep in mind, we ripped a card with the Minstrel, and we ripped 2 with the Moulin Glacia. So right now our opponent has 2 cards in hand. So we can only summon level 2 or lower. So we can really only bring back Prince, but that's all we need to bring back. Then we're going to Synchro 7 into Prima Donna, and then we're going to use Butterfly Fish to bring itself back, discard a card, and link off into the Mermail King Neptibus here. I kind of like to make Mermail King Neptibus before I use Prima Donna, because that means they cannot imperm this now. Of course, they could preemptively imperm it, but yeah, I guess you could just do this to take precaution. We're going to bring out the Barrier Statue and then synchro those 2 into the Adamancipator Risen Raptite. Now, keep in mind, if we had a banish card, we could use the other effect of the Prima Donna. If this card sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 banish card, shuffle it into the deck. And maybe if you're playing against something like Malice per se, this effect could kind of come up with clutch here if they're able to like play on your turn. Keep in mind it is a secret effect, but it can come up quite a bit. So yeah, that's your end board there. You have the Ravenous Crocodragon, which can discard 2 to pop a card. Oh, also one thing I forgot to mention is I did forget to search off of my Dragoons that we discarded off of Poseidon Abyss. So we should have added either Prince or Dragoons. I would add, or not Dragoons, sorry, Infantry. If you have a Poseidon Abyss set up in grave, I would almost recommend adding a Prince instead, because when you discard off your Crocodragon, you can discard the Prince and something else, pop a card, and then Prince can bring back Poseidon. Poseidon can send Dragoons, bounce a card, add Infantry if you have another way to discard, which if we have Ryan in grave, we do. So we can banish that, discard the Infantry, draw a card, pop another card. So that's 3 instances of removal set up there in kind of a chain. Gaios is nice protection, obviously that negation of any monster on the field, face-up monsters on the field, and then monsters can attack that have less attack than this card, I believe. Or level 5 or higher monsters cannot attack, yeah. Which kind of hurts us a little bit, but we're in a winning position so long as Barrier Statue sticks. Dragite, Spell Trap, Negate, anything Mermail King points to cannot be targeted, and obviously they can only special in water monsters, so they're kind of cooked if they don't have an out for this. But yeah, basic combo there. Practice a few times, should come to you, no problem, like it did to me. And let's take a look at the second combo. All right, so this is the second combo here. It is just Teus plus Squad. Keep in mind you can also do Teus plus any random water. And you basically just go for that, you know, grab Rhine, use Rhine, summon the fish, Soelacanth, and just go off. Same thing with Pike. I think I already mentioned that earlier. Obviously a weaker combo, very susceptible to an Ash or an Impulse, but it's still a line you can take nonetheless. But this combo I want to show off because this is like, I think, near max potential of what your end board can look like. So I figured we'd show the top ceiling here. So yeah, we're going to start by going ahead and using Teus, discarding the Shadow Squad, chainlink 1 Shadow Squad, chainlink 2 Teus. Teus is going to add Abyss Shrine, the Atlantean Spirit, and then Shadow Squad, of course, is going to summon Neptibus. Neptibus effect, sending Dragoons, adding Dragoons, and then Dragoons is going to add a copy of Minstrel. And then here we're going to use Minstrel effect, discarding itself in Dragoons to take a look at the opponent's hand and banish a card from it face up till the end of the turn. And that, of course, is going to proc the Dragoons effect again to add a Moulin Glacia. We obviously can't summon Moulin yet, though, because we have 4 waters in grave. We're going to use Abyss Rhine here, sending itself off, and Neptibus to summon this Soelacanth from the deck this time around. And, of course, Neptibus is going to go ahead and bring back a Dragoons here. It does not matter what you bring back with the Prince here at all. We're simply just going to end up using this card as link fodder, so don't get caught up too much in what you have to bring back here with it. I just bring back the Dragoons. Now we have 5 in grave exactly because the Prince brought back 1. So we can summon out the Elemental Lord, and then rip 2 cards from the hand, link off into Haggard Lizardos, solely doing this just to clear room to resolve the Super Ancient Deep Sea King Soelacanth, which we're going to do now, discarding a random card, summoning out Grethus, Butterfly Fish, and the Mermail Abyss Pike, and then you're going to go ahead and use Haggard Lizardos anytime after this to draw a card, because we don't want to use it first, because then we can draw into one of our Soelacanth targets. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and use Monoceros, bring back the Reptile Fin, and now I end up using Haggard Lizardos here, which should be banished. Draw a random card, we did draw a Pike, no big deal. And the Monoceros, I said, yeah, brings back the Grethus. Importantly, you want to bring back Grethus, you need to bring back that card. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be Grethus. Well, I guess it kind of does have to be Grethus because it has to be a level 3 fish that we can overlay into the Virtue Dragon. And the Virtue Dragon, again, going to detach, adding back the Dragoons. And then we're going to overlay into the Abyss Trite. That's going to go ahead and bring back Pike. Important level 4 to bring back there. And then go into Abyss, Poseidon Abyss. This kind of looks familiar setup here, right? We had the Virtue, we had the Poseidon Abyss. We linked these off in an enemy like we did in the last combo. This is kind of like a point you want to try to get to in your combo as many times as you can, except here, obviously, the only difference is we have a little bit more extra on our board. We're going to link those 2 off into Anemone, and zone placement does matter here, so try to match the zone placement as much as you can and as you see it here, because otherwise you don't want to end up blocking your zone under Anemone. I've done that quite a few times in practice and testing, and it does screw you over quite a bit. So Poseidon Abyss effect, discarding the Dragoons we added back from our hand, and then we're going to summon back 3. And then Dragoons effect, I do remember to use it this time, adding Infantry. But again, if you have Poseidon in grave, you can add Neptibus like I mentioned earlier. And then we're going to go ahead and Synchro 7 into Prima Donna. We've cleared that space there under the Anemone, which is huge. Now we're going to use Shadow Squad to make everything level 7, go into a free Gaios there, and then Coral Anemone is going to go ahead and bring back the Reptilfen. We can only bring back a level 1 or 2. We're going to bring back Prince. We're going to synchro 10 since that Butterfly Fish is a level 7 from the Shadow Squad effect into the Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying. If you playing the Ice Shade one, I guess you could make that here as well, but I think Cheng Ying is just way better. Prima Donna, bring out the statue, and then we're going to go ahead and synchro 8 into Dragite, and here we're going to proc the effect of Butterfly Fish, discarding a card to bring itself back. And we can also use Prima Donna effect to put back Haggard Lizardos, because why not have that card in the extra deck? It's a really solid card. And obviously Link Climb into the Mermail King. So we end on Dragite, Cheng Ying, Water Bearer Statue, Gaios, Mermail King. So anything Mermail King points to cannot be targeted. Gaios says level 5 or higher cannot attack. Once Mermail detached, negate the effects of all face-up monster opponent currently controls. Have less attack than this card. Can't summon anything but waters. We have that spell and trap negate. This says anytime something is banished, we can banish a card from opponent's field and graveyard, which we can set up at any time by using Abyss Rhine, banish this card, discard a card to draw one. And if we discard, we can discard the infantry to pop a card and draw, and then trigger Cheng Ying. We just have so many different layers of protection here for our barrier statue. They can't imperm it because of obviously the Mermail King. And if they had 2 imperms, guess what? We're negating that second one with Dragite. No big deal there. So that is it for this little combo portion of the video. So this video has probably gone on long enough at this point. It's well over an hour at this point, and I deeply apologize for that. Ideally, it would have been a little shorter, but, you know, I figure I owe you guys a long video after I think it's been like a 2-month wait since my last upload, and I do greatly apologize for that. Just super stoked to have this video finally out for you guys to see. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments section below, and if you want to see more videos like these in the future. As for what deck I'm going to play next, I'm just going to cut straight to the chase. It's probably going to be Photon Galaxy or something to that effect. But if you guys have any suggestions for decks maybe you think I would like to try, a new deck that I have never played on the channel, feel free to drop them down in the comments and I'll give them some consideration. And yeah, with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, Winter Kills signing out. I'll see you guys around. And last but not least, I owe a big thank you to all of our channel members, especially our Divine level channel members who are Tweeter0226, Professor OO, Cadillacs, Pony Stark, Jose Sepulveda, Misfid, and HCH Cyber. Thank you guys so much for your extremely kind and very generous support of this channel.